Hi friends, Mindy here. I'm going to be setting up my journal to work through authentic faith from Bythewell4god for the month of May. And I am particularly inspired by these beautiful papers from By the Well that released this month. They're just the beautiful mixed media. There's so much texture and grunge to them, and I love that whole look. So I pulled out some journals that I had made in the past just to kind of show you what I'm going to be doing today. So I am going to be using some like mailing envelopes, and this is one that I have created. I'm trying to be careful here because I have prayers and stuff written in here. And then this one was done out of this kind of smaller envelope, but I feel like this is just going to be a little bit too small. And then this is one that I just created a long time ago, but it's the texture that I'm trying to show you because it shows up really well on this particular journal. You can even kind of see some of the book print through there, but it ends up with this almost leathery, kind of soft, just really fun texture doing this technique today. And so this is one that I wanted to share because this one is from like 2015. And again, I'm not going to open it up because there's some private things in there, but I just wanted to show that they do last. So like I said, this is from 2015. This one has a layer of gel medium over the top. It just kind of sealed everything in. So this journal has been around a while and it's still fine. It's not the same as when you do a journal or when I do a journal out of like chipboard or cereal boxes or, Wheat Thins boxes or whatever. Those, give you a hard cover, and I just really wanted the softer cover, but it's still stable enough to withstand what I want to do to it, but it's really just the texture of the journal that I'm after. To me, this kit is just very tactile, or just very visually interesting in the fact that there's just so much texture in the artwork and everything. And so I really wanted my journal cover to have a lot of texture and just a lot of fun dimension and things to it. So I'm starting off with this larger size envelope so I can cut it down to the size that I wanted. I went ahead and pulled out the little metal clip that the little closure, and then I glued the flap shut. And now I took my ruler and I'm measuring out my spine from the center point, and just coming up with my finger kind of along the backside of that ruler underneath there, and then with my bone folder just to kind of score where I want my my spine to be. My spine ends up to be about 1.25 inches, and doing it this way is just going to kind of mark those spaces, and it's going to be a little bit easier to maintain the spine size as I'm creating and adding layers and doing all of those things to this journal. So I'm just kind of marking all of that first so that I know where I want everything. And now I'm going to trim this down to the size that I want. My journal ends up being roughly 5.25 wide by about 6.5 inches tall. There's no rhyme or reason to this. You don't even have to cut it down. If you want a really large journal, this would be an easy way to do it. That one that I created a long time ago, I didn't cut that down. I just used the size envelope that I had. So I am adding some art glitter glue here on the inside just to kind of seal these pages together. It's just going to make it a little bit easier when I'm folding it and everything, so that it doesn't have the buckling and that kind of stuff. And then I pulled out a couple of pages of vintage book paper. This is I just went with some that were lighter in color. I didn't want the real patinaed papers. So I have some music paper and I have some book text, and in the end you're not going to be able to see any of it, but and I'm starting out with collage medium from Tim Holtz because it's really thick and strong, and it's going to hold some of these papers. This one paper in particular is kind of thick, and so I want to make sure that it's adhered down really well. But certainly you could use matte medium, which I will end up using in a little while. You could use watered down white glue, like Elmer's glue, school glue. It's just a white PVA that you could do. There's bookbinders glue. There's, you can use all kinds of things, but this is just what I'm using, and I'm also almost out of my collage medium here, so I will actually move on to another glue, but this glue is just really good. I really like this kind of for my first layer in particular because it dries really quickly and it just kind of really grabs on to those papers. So you can see I did this to the front and to the inside of my cover. And now I'm going to move to matte medium. And the reason for this is because now I'm going to be adding layers of tissue, and it's really thin and it's just easier to work with kind of a wet on wet surface here a little bit. So I'm taking the tissue. This is some of the tissue that was in the devotional kit it was as the texture that came in the kit. And then I had some other scraps as well, and I'm just taking them, I'm crumpling them up, I'm tearing them. I really like a torn edge whenever I'm doing this so that you don't get those harsh lines. But this is why I like to use matte medium, because I can just put the matte medium down, I can spread it over the entire cover, and I can start building my layers without feeling, you know, like it's going to dry on me before I get all of my layers down. And you can see these almost melt into the background. You can hardly see them in some areas. It does kind of dull that paper down a little bit, but really what I'm after here is the texture of these. So all of those wrinkles and where it kind of is overlapping, as long as they're adhered down well, as long as you have a good coating of glue or adhesive or matte medium or whatever, it's going to seal down and you're going to be fine. But those little wrinkles and all of those things, that's exactly what I'm after. So I'm going to purposely make this tissue do that. I'm crumpling it up, I'm layering it over, I'm letting it fold over on itself for an additional layer. And then on the inside, I added some of the Bythewell4god tissue from the packaging. And then I decided I was just going to go ahead and add some to the outside as well, just to kind of get those bold, dark lines from this tissue. And just to kind of give another layer. And again, and I did the same exact thing where I crumpled it all up. I'm just showing you that paper that is kind of inspiring this cover. And I'm going to add another layer. And then just make sure whenever you're doing this particular technique, you want to make sure that you have a good layer underneath it, and you want to make sure you have a good layer over the top. And that's just going to seal everything down in. And so this is where my journal cover is so far. And so I will say this lip video is a little bit longer than my normal videos, and it's kind of a wild ride this time. This was actually a struggle for me, this journal cover. But that's just kind of the way that it is. And I decided to leave all of the struggle in so that I can kind of talk you through what I'm doing and how I fixed it, and some of the things that, you know, I had to kind of identify as my issues kind of along the way. So this next step would be something that I would always do too, just to kind of bring everything in, you know, into focus a little bit as in terms of making it more cohesive. I'm adding a layer of watered down gesso. So I keep an old bottle of gesso, and I just have added water to it. It's really, really thin, and I'm just doing a coat on here, and then I'm going to kind of wipe it back a little bit. You'll see I just have a paper towel here. I'm going to pull some of that paint up, and then it's going to reveal still some of the visual texture from all those really heavy lines of the tissue, but it's also is going to start revealing some of the texture just that was put in there from all of the different layers. So once I dried that really, really well, I am going to start applying my paint. So I'm using this awesome paint scraper that Bythewell4god included in some of the kits this month. I have a little video actually on this paint scraper as well. And then I'm just adding it to the edge of the paint scraper, and then I'm scraping it along there because I want it to do all of the fun things and interact in fun ways with all of the texture that I put into this cover. So I have all of those lines. I have the area, you know, trying to make sure to work through the spine area, and you can add the paint directly to the cover too and spread it around that way. These Dina Wakley paints that I'm using, this color is Peacock. It's a heavier body paint, and so you're going to get a little bit different coverage than you would with like a craft paint or something that's just a little bit thinner. And so I'm just going around and scraping this and adding color, and this seemed like a good idea at this moment. I really love this color, and I'm really trying to utilize this color, but it was just kind of a little bit too much in the end. And so I went back and I added some darker color of actually that first color was turquoise, I'm sorry, and the darker color was Peacock. And then I want to add in now some of these other colors that are in this mixed media paper that I'm trying to emulate. And so I pulled in the color that's blushing, and now I'm using the back of a palette knife just to kind of get another just different texture and to kind of hit the high points of the texture. And then I came in with another color, which was Carnation, which is just a lighter pink, to try to brighten this back up a little bit. And then I wanted to still add in some of the orange and some of the yellow and things that are in those papers as well. And so I started kind of doing a little bit of like finger painting. The problem that I found out with the orange that I had, which is tangerine, is it's a little bit more translucent than some of the other colors. So one of the ways you can kind of work through that is to just add a little bit of gesso. It'll make the color lighter, but it will make it more opaque because gesso is opaque. So I'm just kind of going in here and adding a little bit, and then you can always add another layer of color over the top of it if you really want to get back to that. intense color. And then I was trying to blend in some of the turquoise as well, and kind of just, there was like a very specific look, and I have it in my head, and I can't say that I ever actually got to what I had in my head, but I did get to something eventually that worked for me. And I know that this looks like a hot mess. I promise it's a hot mess. And I have always said whenever I'm doing mixed media things that, you know, that you get to this point while you're creating that it is a hot mess and you're like, oh my goodness, I've totally destroyed this. And that's kind of where people stop and they kind of freeze and they're like, oh no, what am I going to do? This is horrible. And they just give up. And so that's kind of the point where I'm at here. And I decide, you know, I just need to keep pushing through. That's what I encourage people to do. This is actually the inside of that cover. You can kind of see, now we're back to the outside, but I'm like, okay, so I need to darken this up. And this was kind of the technique that I used on that brown journal from the beginning clip. And I'm watering down some black paint. And this is a wild ride. We're going to go there, but I just covered the entire thing with this watered down black paint. And what I wanted was for all of that really dark black to kind of soak down into some of those crevices and things that were created from all of the texture from the tissue. And it did do that, because what we're going to do is then you have to kind of work quickly, especially with the Dina Wakley paints, because they're heavy body and so they dry a little bit faster. But I'm just going to come in now with a baby wipe and I'm going to start pulling up some of that paint. I don't want to pull up all of it, but I really am trying to leave some of that darker texture down in the crevices. And admittedly, I will tell you, this technique works a lot better with like a neutral background, so that you get that kind of brown leather look as opposed to this look. At this point, I was like, okay, this is okay, but it's just too dark. I want to brighten it up some. And so I'm still trying to work through this. So I'm like, I'm still not in love with it, so let's add another layer. So I added some white. And then I'm just going to do that same process. I was really trying to kind of brighten it back up. And so I added the layer of white. I'm going to go through same thing, going back through with a paper towel or a baby wipe and kind of pulling up some of that white that I put down. I added some of the turquoise back in to try to bring back some of the color because it just dulled it down way more than I wanted it to be. And it was really just trying to get everything to look cohesive, and it really just wasn't. And so I was like, well, you know, here's kind of what it looks like after I pulled up all of that, you know, the white that I wanted to pull up. I was like, well, let's just add the next layer and see what happens. And so I pulled in this collage stamp that Bythewell released, and I just started stamping with some StazOn ink. And then I went through and tried to find one of the journaling cards that I could use for a focal image. Here you can see all of the stamping that I've done. I've actually used the collage stamp and some of the mixed media marks from a couple months ago. And then I decided I wanted to do some more mark making. So I pulled in that orange color again to kind of, again, try to brighten everything back up, and also to pull in some of the orange and the pinks from the journaling card that's going to be the focal point on the front of my cover. And so I'm just using some random like lids and paper towel rolls and whatever, just to kind of get those messy circles. I'm using my fan brush with some watered down white paint and doing some paint splatters, again, thinking that this contrast between these, you know, colors and the white and the black, usually having those contrasts kind of helps pull everything together. And so I have my journaling card over there. I made sure to put some little paint splatters on there to make everything kind of cohesive. I have this turquoise paint that I'm adding to the edge of the journaling card to kind of help it blend into the background of my journal cover. I'm just applying that just a little bit with my fingers. I did rough up the edges a little bit with a tool, you know, like a razor. And then I glued this down, and I'm looking at it, and it's not what I wanted it to be at all. I'll give you kind of a still shot of what it actually looks like. And, you know, and maybe it was okay, but it just wasn't what I had in mind. And so at this point I decide I'm going to redo it. And so I pull this journaling card up. Now, because there's enough layers of paint, I was able to do this. It did obviously destroy the journaling card, which I was really upset about, but I couldn't save the journaling card. I did sand it down a little bit with my Tim Holtz sanding disc, and now I'm going to cover this entire thing in gesso and basically start over. But I want to address kind of some of where I pulled up the paint, and there's a little bit of leftover paper glued down, and so now I'm just going back and adding some more tissue and some more texture, because I lost a lot of the texture that I wanted when I added so many layers of paint. It kind of just filled in all of the texture. And so I'm coming back and I'm actually using my gesso this time as my adhesive. So you can kind of see now the texture, at least, that I was going for in this journal. And so you can use, you know, when you're doing this, like especially with tissue, you can use gesso. It will actually seal it down just as well. So basically matte medium is, you know, like acrylic paint, but without color. And so you're basically what you're doing. So anyway, I started with the lightest color. So instead of starting with a dark teal, I'm starting with the lightest color, and I'm going to try and work the opposite way. I think I had just gone too intense in color the first time. And so I'm going to come in with this carnation paint, and I'm going to come in with the blushing color, which is the next shade of pink that I have, and kind of blending those two together. You'll see me go back and forth between my fingers and paintbrush and whatever, and I pull in some gesso as well to kind of really give it that sort of cloudy, blendy look. I'm trying to work even a little bit wet into wet with the paints. I'm trying to work quickly before they dry so that I can really get some of these colors to blend and have like soft delineation instead of like really, really harsh lines. And so I'm just adding all of the turquoise, again, adding a bunch of turquoise here, a little too much. And then I added some gesso to kind of lighten that up a little bit, because it was starting to get really intense, like more intense than I intended it to be at this point anyway. So again, just kind of going back and forth, adding the gesso. And then now I have pulled out my acrylic inks. These are fluid acrylics, and these are, I have this one is from Amsterdam. It's quinacridone rose, and I just squirted a little bit across the top, and then I sprayed some water, and then it started kind of sticking into those crevices of all of that texture exactly the way that I wanted it to. So I added some more, and then I dried it exactly when I had it, how I wanted it, basically. And then down in this corner, I added some yellow medium azo, which is actually a Liquitex brand. And I added that kind of in with that other rose color to kind of get that orange that I was looking for. And I'm just working in small sections with my droppers from these bottles. And these are going to be permanent when they're dry as well, because they're acrylic ink. And so, and I kind of used my heat tool to sort of move the ink and let it do what I wanted it to do. And so here I'm adding a couple colors. Neither of these colors really match the kit, but together they make a really beautiful teal. And so I'm actually kind of mixing these two colors together. And I really just love the teal color that comes out when you mix these two colors together. So you can see me kind of adding both of those. I kind of got a little too much ink right here, which I end up actually picking up with a tag. And then you can kind of see I've added some. I ended up mixing the color off on a palette, and then I applied it to that corner. You can see I'm just drying that. And then I'm going to kind of start working my way now to the other side of this. I'm adding some more of that rose color, some more of the yellow medium hue, and just getting that orange. And then kind of when I get it where I want it, I dry it, or I use the heat tool to kind of spread the color where I want it to go. And I'm sort of working from the outside of the journal cover to the inside, because I know that I'm going to have a journaling card on the front cover to be my focal image. So I don't need to have, you know, everything right in the middle, especially on that front side. And then the back side, I'm just making sure to let the colors just kind of flow where they want to and just sort of gather in all of the layers. I'm adding, again, some of that that teal color that I mixed together, and then I am just spraying it with some water so it moves really well, and then taking advantage of my heat tool in the same way almost that you would do like alcohol ink, to kind of get it to move around how you want. And then I'm coming back to this collage stamp, and I'm not stamping the whole thing. There's just a couple little sections of it that I want to use. So I'm using kind of that little keyboard that's down at the bottom, because I really love that, and the little polka dots. And I'm just going to go around. I am actually using StazOn ink for this, because I'm doing this over all of this acrylic paint, and it's a nice dark black, which is what I'm after. And certainly acrylic ink or archival ink would work as well. And then this is where I pulled in those mixed media marks stamps as well. And then I'm just kind of going around, adding a few stamps, just However, it seems in hindsight, I probably could have even done a little bit less. And then I came in with another tool, added some white circles. I felt like the scale of this was just a little bit too big, so I added a couple and then I just left it at that. And then I pulled out my little paint card again, and I'm going to use that same white paint, and I'm just going to make little lines and bring in some white really to kind of just help brighten everything back up. And so I'm just tapping it onto where I have the white paint over off to the side, and then tapping and making some little lines and making them crisscross and everything. And then I took some black. Again, it's all about contrast for me, especially with mixed media projects like this. And I'm really trying to emulate that one paper in particular. And so there were like black circles on it. So I'm taking the cap of something and just putting some acrylic paint on it, and then adding that on there. And then I'm taking my fan brush and I added some white dots, and then I also added some black. And then I really loved how this one corner turned out, and so it was actually supposed to be the back cover, but I really loved that one section, so I ended up deciding to make that the front cover. So I kind of flipped my journal upside down. And then I'm going to go through the journaling cards. This is the one I determined I wanted to have on the cover, and so I'm going to glue this down. I did do the same thing. I roughed up the edges with my Tim Holtz Distresser tool. I added some of the turquoise paint just around the edge, really to kind of help blend that back into the cover. And I will add some other things to help that as well, to really make this seem like it's all more one piece. But this ended up being more what I had in mind, not quite there, but more of what I had in mind, because it still has that intensity and those bright colors, but not so much dark like the first version of this journal. The first iteration was just, I think the problem was I went too dark too soon. And so working light to dark just worked better for me. And then I'm adding some Stabilo pencil around the outside of this, and then using my water brush to get that pigment to dissolve, and that's just going to help that. And then I went all the way around the cover with that Stabilo as well. And now I'm coming in and adding some little paint dots with my fan brush and some watered down white paint, and I'm actually going to do that with some black as well. And at this point I'm making sure that I get some of that onto the journaling card as well, so that it kind of pulls everything together. And I'm getting closer to where I want it to be. I did decide to add the title of the kit, which is Authentic Faith. I used my Dymo label maker to do that. So I just stamped that out, and then I'm going to trim this down and sort of layer it. And I'm going to be purposeful to make sure that part of this title spreads over onto the cover from the journaling card. And then I will go around that with that Stabilo as well. But now I'm trying to really just incorporate this journaling card onto the cover, so it doesn't look like I just slapped it down, if that makes sense. And I'm going to come back now with some of those mixed media marks, stamps, and just in a couple of places I'm just adding some stamping that also kind of goes onto the cover, so it seems like it's all more one piece. And I'm pulling that collage stamp back out, and now I'm going to put some dots that are kind of in the same location from the background onto my journaling card, and so that it looks like it was all kind of one piece, if that makes sense. Here's where I'm going around that title with my Stabilo, and then I will use my water brush again with this, and this kind of got a little bit dark, so I end up adding a little bit more of this to the edge of my journal as well. It just kind of got kind of dark. You can see here I'm just going to add a little bit, and then up at the top right hand corner as well, just adding a little bit more. And you can see I've pulled out my Posca paint pens. I want to now just do some mark making on here, and I'm making sure that I'm in whatever I'm doing into like the actual background of the journal, I'm also doing onto the journal card. So I'll have a few little marks that start on the journaling card and kind of spill off onto the background as a way to just kind of, again, tie everything together. I do end up using this pink one around the title as well, just to kind of draw a little bit more interest. And this is really just sort of intuitive. I end up doing some dots and some lines and dashes and whatever. It's really kind of hard to see, I guess, from this vantage point, but it does help. I will put some close-ups down at the end, but this is what my journal looked like. So if you made it this far, thank you so much. I know this was a long one. Let me know if you'd like to see part 2 where I actually put the signatures into the journal. I just wanted to cover the cover in this video. So anyway, if you liked it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and until next time, bye.